How did it start? Was it through your collecting, or...?
Actually goes back a long way, because I trained as an architect and qualified as an architect and worked as an architect for 12 years. But I'd always been totally addicted to travel, long before the sort of it came normal for people to travel. I was just addicted to travel. So architecture practice in Cambridge doesn't really mix with going to Asia and places like that. So it sort of evolved that my profession became my hobby and my hobby became a profession. And I really just started travelling, and to help pay for it I bought things and very originally sold them on Cambridge Market. We're going back to the 1960s, late 1960s, you know, those smelly Afghan coats and things like that. And really it evolved from that and grew from that, and we moved from Cambridge to Haddenham quite a long time ago. And the galleries actually started about 25 years ago, maybe even longer. The art gallery was a natural extension to having artists in studios, and having the ethnic gallery and the tribal rug gallery also in the same building gave it a very mixed feeling, so that you really people would come, and it was a bit of an adventure, because you'd have work by local makers, whether it be glass or pictures or paintings, alongside some very unusual ethnic bits and pieces. I mean, this doorway is quite special. It's from the very north of the Swat Valley, which is the area between Afghanistan and Pakistan. It is 17th century, believe it or not, and would have been just a doorway to a merchant's house originally. A lot of people ask me, you know, how do you get it here? Why have you robbed it from this village? But what happens is it's a very unstable geographically part of the world, and they have a lot of landslides and floods and things like that. And the particular village that this came from, which is sort of one of the tributaries to the main Swat River, there had been a huge earthquake and a landslide, and they'd lost their water supply. So they had just abandoned the village and moved to somewhere else. And so I managed to acquire this, which is quite exceptional. All the people I buy from abroad are very, very good friends, very close friends. That's how we like to do it. A lot of them, I now know their sons who have also got sons. I mean, there's a very good friend from Afghanistan who I know the father very well, but now I deal with his son, who has got a teenage son himself. That's how it works. And a lot of it's done entirely on trust. You know, it's just the way we enjoy doing it, the way they enjoy doing it.
But I know you have written some books about Kilims.
Yes, I've written 2 books about Kilims and been contributed to quite a number of other books on various ethnic art and so on. Back in the late 1980s, there was virtually no knowledge of Kilims, tribal flat woven rugs, and so I had this idea that most of the books on rugs then were just large colourful plates of a rug with no sense of scale or size or location or anything like that. So I devised this idea of actually photographing and describing Kilims in location, in people's rooms as they actually had them. And fortunately the idea was picked up by publishers, and so it turned into a very successful book called Living with Kilims, where all the photographs are of rugs actually in the location as people had them. We occasionally moved a horrible jug out of the corner or something like that, but it gave a real sense of how you can use rugs, tribal rugs, and how you can fit them into an interior. The second book I wrote was a much more studied, big book on kilims and their origins and how to determine where they're from and so on. Something like this would have been, well, this one is actually a prayer rug. You can tell by this mirab shape there. But being a prayer rug, it's quite complicated in its weave. It's a mixture of flat weave. This patterning here you can see on the back is called floating weft, because when it's not used on the front it just floats along the back. So you can get quite complicated, very detailed pattern with the weaving. But here this is knotted pile, which is all part of the same structure, the same warp and weft of the rug. But it's very, very complicated to do, to get it to lie flat and keep the tensions right, because the knotted pile takes up quite a bit more space than the flat weaving does. So to actually create something like this takes a lot of skill and a lot of time and a lot of work. I mean, often the most skillful weavers are just simple people who will be living in a yurt, a traditional tent, and will actually be doing the weaving in between, looking after the children and getting water and cooking and everything like that.
So it's mainly the women that...
Oh, it's mainly the women who weave, yes. The men will do a lot of the preparation of the wool. They will card it and clean it and then dye it. That's the men's work, but the women will nearly always be the weavers. Not always, but nearly always.
The garden, because I can remember that the garden came much later.
The garden was very green, and I just thought, having got this space, it would be quite interesting just to see what happens if we don't do anything to it. We just treat it as a natural meadow and mow it twice a year and just see what arrives naturally. And last winter we had a lovely little roe deer that was using the pond to drink from, so when it was very frosty I used to come and break the ice and the frost, but you could see these little footprints through the snow. And one morning I discovered it had actually made a hide in some of the brambles, a perfect cave with this beautiful, beautiful little roe deer sleeping in it.
And the sculptures themselves, where did they come from?
They come, some of them come from abroad, some of them come from Indonesia, but a lot of them are made by local artists, makers. The steel ones come from a fellow who lives in just south of Birmingham actually, but then those two wonderful wooden ones over there come from a girl in Norfolk who's very talented. It's just a really eclectic collection which I enjoy, and we occasionally sell them, but it's not a sort of garden centre type sculpture garden. It's just using the space, and I mow it so that it's just a bit of an adventure to walk round. There's sort of different routes you can take and different paths, and people come here and just relax because it's such a lovely relaxing space. The hide is actually a straw building. It's made out of straw bales. A good friend of mine called Bob the Builder has this project of building houses and various other outbuildings out of straw bales. So we ran a workshop with about 10 people over 2 weekends and built this hide. In fact, it's not really a hide, because as soon as we built it, the birds started nesting in it, so it came the reverse of a hide. You had to stand outside to see the birds inside. I mean, my philosophy on buying abroad has just naturally evolved, in that I do just specialise in 2 areas of the world. On the Central Asia, that's Afghanistan, Iran, Pakistan, Northwest Frontier and Nepal, and the Indonesian archipelago. This is because I need to know in great depth what things are, how they fit into the culture, if they've got any age, if they have any religious significance. I need to be able to answer all these questions for myself, which in turn I can relate in stories to anybody else. It would be very easy for me to get on a plane and go to Bogota tomorrow morning and buy a suitcase full of stuff and bring it back and flog it, but it wouldn't mean anything to me.